and welcome to What's Possible, Next Level Thinking with World-Class Coaches. I am thrilled to introduce you to my friend and SBC colleague, Shannon Polly. Shannon is a woman of many expertise, trades, etc., skill sets. However, I'm going to dial it right in to the areas that really relate to what we're going to talk about today. Shannon is a professional actor. She is also a producer, a Broadway producer, actually, not just any producer. She has her master's in applied positive psychology from the University of Pennsylvania. She is also co-author, co-editor of Character Strengths Matter. I refer to this book all the time. In the chat, we'll put the VIA Strengths assessment, a link to that. And this book is a wonderful companion piece to the VIA Strengths assessment. So before we go any further, I want to welcome Shannon, and then I'll let you know the topic that we're going to be addressing today. So welcome, Shannon.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Good to see you. So the topic that we're talking about, which is interesting, is performance anxiety. And Shannon does a tremendous amount of work for us as well as for others around executive presence and how to show up. And the funny thing is, just even getting this one started today, I kept on stumbling on the title of our series, which I'm normally able to say smoothly every single time. But there are some times that where you want to do it right and you kind of stumble. So Shannon, I'm going to turn it over to you before we dive too deeply into the conversation around performance anxiety. Can you give your definition of what that means?
Sure. Sometimes I use the phrase performance anxiety, and sometimes I use just the phrase nerves, because the word anxiety is a clinical term, and there are, clinical levels of anxiety that some people experience, and that's not the kind of anxiety that I'm talking about. So that would require someone who is a PhD and maybe some medication, some talk therapy to work through that. So what I'm talking about are the moments where you're getting ready to do a big meeting and your boss is going to be in the room and you feel butterflies or your throat goes dry or maybe all the words fly out of your head. For every person, it's a different physical or somatic reaction. But basically those nerves that you feel before you're going to do something, speaking to other people.
Yeah, I love even just shifting it to nerves versus anxiety almost releases some of the pressure of it, because in my mind, it feels more manageable.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah.
I love that you said that, because actually there is some research that when you tell speakers that no one can tell they're nervous, they become less nervous.
Yeah.
And it's not just a placebo effect. The truth is that people can't tell as much. I can't tell what's going on if you have butterflies or not right now. The only thing I can tell is I'll say to people, don't carry a piece of paper. Right? Because if you're nervous, this will give you away. A few other things might give you away. I had one person I worked with who just sweat, like serious flop sweat on the ground when he was getting ready to speak or perform. That is a giveaway. Most other things, people are pretty self-centered, and they're mostly thinking about, is this engaging? What am I going to get out of it? And they're not really thinking about you very much.
Yeah, it's kind of like if they're thinking also about what question am I going to ask? If it's a live thing, they're thinking about their own performance. Even if you're the one speaking and you're presenting, the people in the audience are thinking, I want to say something intelligent. I want to ask something. So they're checking in with themselves.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. And that's one of the things that I talk about when I'm coaching people or doing a workshop on executive presence or presentation skills, is that oftentimes if we think of it as a scene and we have a camera that's facing us. So when we're getting ready to perform, if we have nerves, it's like the camera's focused on us and we're thinking, oh no, I have butterflies. This isn't good. I'm starting to sweat. What are they thinking? Am I gonna have pity in my shirts? Like, what should I put a jacket on? And what I tell people to do is to turn the camera to the audience. So focus on the audience. What do you want them to get out of it? What impact do you want to have on them? And then you can check, scan the crowd, look at people's eyes. Is it working? Am I engaging them? Are they with me? As opposed to this sort of self-centered thing, which is human nature.
Yeah, sure.
And that can really, really help.
Yeah, along those lines, that's what I'll, when working with a client who's preparing for a tough meeting, even if it's just a meeting with their manager or someone on their team or a larger, they could be speaking to 500 people. I always say, let's speed to the end. What do you want people to think, feel, and do as a result of their interaction with you? And I think that speaks to what you're talking about. It's really put the spotlight on whoever is on the other side of the camera or the other side of the desk. Versus,
yeah, I love that. What do you want them to think, feel, and do? And actors in our work, we don't play an emotion. You can't play sad in a scene, but you can think, what am I trying to do? Like you said, do to the other person. And the way we phrase it is as an infinitive verb, to blank. So I usually coach people to find what's the most powerful verb you can choose. If you say to explain, to educate, to persuade, I'll usually say to someone, now, does that compel you if someone wants to explain something to you, or if they want to, persuade you? And they're usually like, no, I usually don't want to be persuaded. So then we go with, well, what's the most powerful thing you could do? Maybe it's to excite, to influence, to inspire. And those words have a sort of higher level resonance and are more powerful, usually when the person is what we call playing an action.
Oh, I love that. You're right. It shifts everything. And it shifts how you speak, not only, and the words you choose when you're, talking. And again, it could be one person or it could be an audience of 1,000. It doesn't matter who, but to shift it to that two, I like that a lot.
Yeah, well, it's interesting. There's, we in positive psychology, we want to look for what the research is as well. I mean, theater has been around for eons, and we, have an intuition why things work. But there actually was some research done with monkeys in Italy, and the monkeys in Italy, they kicked a ball, and the researchers found a neuron in their brain fired, and then they watched another monkey kick a ball, and the same neuron in their brain fired. So just watching someone do the same thing had the neuron fire. So then they had humans do it. They kicked a ball. They watched someone else kick a ball. Then they read the word to kick, and the same neurons in their brain fired. So these active words actually activate your brain. And we know because of mirror neurons that we mimic other people. So if my brain is activated, then your brain is activating in response to mine.
Yeah. Well, and it just makes me think of that emotion contagion and being able to, and it is interesting. It makes me go from there to showing up authentically, because I know I've been in situations where I'm in the audience, say, and I feel someone presenting, and it feels like they're presenting something that's outside of them. It's not them. And my takeaway is so much less than when somebody is like, it's every cell in their body believes in what they're saying. They practice what they're saying. They're doing what they're saying. And I think that power of authenticity also, I don't know any research on this, but it would impact those mirror neurons and that contagion as well. And I'm curious your thoughts on showing up authentically versus not, and how that impacts being able to perform, if you will.
Yeah. Well, I'm curious, how did you know that, like, there's one speaker where they weren't authentic, or it felt like it was outside of them, and the other person was?
Oh, good question.
Was it like a gut reaction, or?
I think it was an energetic reaction, like a gut, like I could feel the energy of, it was someone who read, but maybe not necessarily living it. But I felt more of a gut. So I could be off. I could be off on that. But
no, I don't know that you are. I'm just curious. I try to get to the behavioral, like, what did you notice? It's funny. My daughter this morning came up with a great phrase. She said, when your voice goes higher, you're a liar. Like, oh my God.
Wow. Well, it could be some of that though. It is when you kind of feel in tune. This sounds so California woo-woo, but because I am in California, I'll say it, is that just picking up that vibe and energy and that vibe of the voice, the sound of the voice, or how someone shows up, if it feels like this is them.
Yeah. Well, there actually is some research that's often misquoted. Albert Morabian did a study about when things are incongruous. So he tested voice, gestures, and the actual words people said. And when they were incongruous, he tested which ones did you trust. So, if I went to shake your hand and I had like a limp fish handshake and I said, "It's so great to meet you." Right? Both my body and my tone of voice is not saying I really am
Exactly.
happy to meet you, but the words say I'm happy to meet you. And, as a gut response, human beings, we sort of get that, oh, wait, that's not real.
Yeah.
So it's often misquoted to say that 93% of what you can convey comes across non-verbally, which is of course not true. You have to have words.
Of
You have to
course.
have a compelling argument. You have to have a good coherent structure. But if things are incongruous, like you said, with the person who's not authentic, if they're not believing what they're saying, then we can sense it almost immediately. So
Exactly.
yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
I like that there's research behind when I can't even describe why I feel that way. So now I'll depend on
Yeah,
research to justify my gut reaction. Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah.
So I'm curious for you, given that you are an actor, you've produced, and then we bring you in all the time to do trainings for our leaders, or not our leaders, but our clients' leaders on executive presence or on performance and nerves and how to deal with that. You, as a facilitator, you as an actor or a producer, must get nervous at times. What do you personally do?
That's a great question. Well, first of all, I love that you realize that that happens for me too. I mean, it happens for everybody. I think that's the biggest myth is people think, oh, well, you've trained, so you don't feel nerves. This weekend, I had to give a big presentation to all of my colleagues. And about an hour before the presentation, my heart rate was going so fast, I thought I had tachycardia. I was like, oh, right. The difference is that I don't add the second layer, or as Buddhism would call it, the second arrow. I don't worry about it because I know I know what it is. It's my heart rate. And I don't label it like this is terrible, right? It's not a judgment on top of the feeling. Because for me, I reframe it as, ooh, this is my energy. This is my juice. This is what I'm going to use to perform well. And actually, I get nervous if I'm not nervous because that means I'm flat and I have to manufacture that energy from somewhere. So I often tell people, you have to figure out a way to reframe it. That's a cognitive strategy because an actor on opening night has as much adrenaline running through them as someone who's been in a car accident.
Wow.
So you can imagine someone who's giving a really big town hall, someone who has a big pitch to their boss, you have an enormous amount of adrenaline just physiologically. So you have to, one, just know it's going to be there. There's nothing wrong with you. And two, then you have to have strategies to deal with it.
Oh, I love that. So it's really anticipating it and, like you said, reframing and almost welcoming it in. The other thing that I had heard too is to be able to remind yourself, oh, wow, this is obviously important to me because I feel the nerves. If you're flat, like you said, do you care that much about it? I think our body, and I definitely feel things through my body. And when I can feel those kind of nerves or, my stomach going, I do try to stop myself and say, this is something important to me. And that's exciting, to have that.
Yeah, exactly. If reframe it as excitement or back to my daughter again, she said, I'm service. I'm excited and nervous.
Well, I absolutely love that. And I have a client who calls it nerve-sighted. So the same kind of thing.
Excited. I
Nervous
like
and
it.
excited. Yes.
I like it.
And just for the benefit of our viewers, Shannon is not talking about an adult child. Clearly, you can tell because Shannon is not old enough to have an adult child, but your child is very wise at how old is she?
She's 9.
No.
I could have an adult child.
Uh,
Yeah, that's
well,
very kind of you. I always joke that if I lived in California, I'd have, more work done. But anyway,
the sun has not been kind to us. Let's just say that. So no, I love really a lot of this is rethinking how you connect with nerves, performance nerves. I know for myself, before I'll do, say, a talk or a webinar or something, I love blasting music and dancing because it gets me out of my head. What are some
nice.
things that you do that help you?
Yeah, sometimes I will definitely exercise in the morning. I think that like vigorous exercise can get some of that level of nerves out. Maybe the night before, I'll take a hot bath or a hot shower in the morning. Again, another sort of physical thing. And yeah, I had a client this week who has just crippling performance anxiety. And he said that he went and talked to a coworker. And he was like, and the coworker was kind of boring, but it distracted me from what I was about to talk about. And I had, 15 minutes. And I was like, yeah, I think that sort of not focusing on it, because we can over focus
Yes.
and fixate on it, is helpful.
I love that. Even what you were saying with talking to someone. The other thing is, I'll say to clients, sing a song because you cannot be singing and thinking about what you're supposed to do at the same time. So singing gets you. Even when I'm dancing, if I'm listening to the music, I could, if I wanted to, think about what
Yeah.
I'm about to do. But singing, it's like that takes all your resources.
Well, I love that example too, because if you're singing, you have to have your breath moving. You have to be breathing.
Yeah.
And the thing about when we're anxious is, for me, I can feel my stomach clench right away, which means I'm not breathing, which sort of pulls up on this. And then I'm my shallow breathing, like, and the problem with shallow breathing is that it can mimic anxiety. When you were like,
Mhm.
or like, I'm really scared. So it's really that deep breathing that is also going to lower your heart rate. And it's the exhale that lowers your heart rate, that kicks in the parasympathetic nervous system. So I had a client who was like, is all this breathing stuff just like hocus pocus? It's like, no, actually, there's a lot of research on breathing. It's the only reflexive activity in our body that we have control over. So, you can do box breathing where you're breathing in on four, hold for four, out on four, hold for four. But I like the one where you either spend as long as you can exhaling, getting it all out, or at least exhale twice as long as you inhale, because your mind is focused on the counting and not on your presentation.
Yeah, I love the 478 for that purpose.
Yeah.
Yeah, Andrew Wiles 478 because the exhale is so long on it. So
Yeah. Yeah. So
yeah,
that's breathing in for four, hold for seven, out on eight. Yeah, it's a great one.
yeah, and we can put that in the chat for our viewers. It made me think back to your daughter when you were saying that if we're breathing from here, it goes back to the higher the liar, or so it's if we
Right.
can get it lower, it's like it gets back to that pure, authentic self.
Yeah, it grounds you physically, it grounds you. And I feel like dancing can ground you physically. So something, when our brain sort of goes away in that other like worry place. Another thing people do is, what are five things you can see, four things you can touch, three things you can smell, two things you can taste, or something to get you into your senses to ground you.
Yeah, it's interesting. We've been doing a bunch of these webinars, and I almost feel like all of them get distilled back to mindfulness,
Mm.
presence, breathing. If we can master that, we'll be able to tackle a lot in our lives.
Yeah, I think it's really a combination of both the somatic and the cognitive. So, I was working with one woman, and I was sort of asking her about the nerves, the anxiety, and she said, "Well, I'm 47 years old. I should be a good speaker by now." And I was like, "I don't think that there's like a contract that like once you turn a certain age, you have a certain skill set."
Check that box.
Yeah. And so once she worked it out and realized that, oh, these are tools and I can use these tools, then something clicked for her and she was fine. So I feel like it's both the somatic, but it's also our beliefs around it. So a lot of times I'll use what, our viewers maybe familiar with from cognitive behavioral therapy, but the ABCDE. What's the activating event? What's your belief? What's your thought about the event in the moment? So, if your thought is, if the speech doesn't go well, my boss isn't going to be happy, and then I'm going to get fired. Well, then it makes sense why you're nervous.
Yeah.
But if you can shift that thought to, this is just one moment in time, I've done these things before, sort of figuring out your pattern of thoughts, I think the cognitive element can be really helpful as well.
Definitely. And I think it also requires embracing a growth mindset, that this is something, even you who is so experienced in it, who is brought in as an expert to train people, we all can keep growing and getting better. And I think one thing that can easily happen is if we gave a presentation, last month and kind of felt like, oh, that bombed, that hit flat. Now we're going to give another one. That's the last thing in our mind. And so we've already told ourselves, oh, I'm not good at giving presentations. Oh, I bore people. Oh, people were disengaged. And so before we move on to our next section, I want to actually follow up on that. What is your advice if someone does feel like I'm just not a good speaker, or I bombed recently and that's what's in their head? How can people manage that thought?
Well, first I would ask a coaching question.
As you should.
I would ask a powerful coaching question so they would come up with their own insight. And then I would distinguish between, is this a catastrophic thought? Does it go to, I'm not a good speaker, I'm going to get fired, then I'm going to be homeless on the street, like that kind of thought? Or is the thought I'm not a good speaker, period, the end, sort of more of a fixed mindset? So for the fixed mindset thought, I probably would do the ABCDE tool. James Pennebaker from UT Austin talks about how writing helps us process. And I think externally, seeing your thoughts on paper or telling your thoughts to someone else, a lot of times I'll do this and clients will say, well, this is silly, but this was my thought. They're like editing, they're seeing it as they're saying it, like, well, of course I'm not going to get fired from doing one presentation like this.
Right.
So I definitely I like journaling. I think writing things down and also looking for evidence. When is the evidence you've been successful in the past?
Yeah. Oh, I like that. So writing it down, having evidence of success. The other thing, as you were talking, it made me think about, appreciative inquiry, and also just both of us are trained in the shift positive. And, one of the questions is when we're working with someone on a 360 is, if Shannon were even more effective, what would that look like? And even being able to ask yourself after, say, a talk that you didn't feel as good. I know I'll say to my clients, write down what you did right, what you did well, and if you were more effective, what would that look like? And hopefully that can also, because then you do get a second chance. We don't always get second chances in life, but with a presentation, we might not get a second chance on that particular topic, but we get a second chance on whatever the future topics are.
Yeah. And I mean, I don't know if all viewers know what we're talking about. The Shift Positive 360 is a revolutionary way to look at a 360. It's interview based. It is strengths based. It looks at the system. And instead of looking at what's wrong, it's looking at an approach goal. What do you want to have moving forward? So the other thing I wanted to highlight based on what you said is that there is some research that novices, people who are new to something. So if you are brand new to giving big talks in town halls or these big meetings, you actually need more positive feedback than someone who's maybe more advanced. So you need that reinforcement, whereas someone who's been speaking for years and years maybe only needs like a tweak or two of you could have waited a beat before that joke and it would have landed better.
Sure. Yeah, that's actually, I like that because it also, for me, I just heard also permission to be human, permission to be new at something and getting better at it, and really seek out what went well. And oftentimes that positive feedback and reflection, it needs to come from within. Hopefully people in your world will give that to you, but we can beat ourselves up so badly. And so keeping in mind that, oh, right, Shannon said, as a newer presenter, it's really important that I look for what's right and give myself some kudos.
Absolutely. And I think sort of what you were hinting about was a bit of maybe perfectionism that a lot of our very high performing clients, hold themselves to a very high bar. And the research on self compassion shows that it's actually when you're compassionate with yourself that you end up performing better, not when you beat yourself up. So having some compassion, that permission to be human, I don't think I've ever given a perfect speech or a perfect presentation or perfect workshop. There's always something I would have tweaked. So having some compassion that, yeah, it's alive, it's happening in the moment. You're not editing it, so that those things are going to happen.
Yeah. Oh, I could talk about this topic. I always say that I get to the end of these and I'm like, oh, can we just go on for a few more hours? I am going to invite you to play one, two, three with me. Are you ready?
I think so. I think so. Okay.
What is one mindset shift around performance and managing your nerves that you'd like our viewers to take away?
Nerves are normal. Welcome and invite your nerves to tea. They can sit in the corner, they can have a little cracker, and they're going to be there. As long as you welcome them, they're less likely to bother you.
Nerves are normal. Oh, I like that. All right. Two ideas or facts. You have, what I really love always about talking with you, the research backwards and forwards. So it's not just Shannon Polly thinking, hey, this might be a good thing to try out. Yes, you might suggest something to try out, but you always have really deep research to follow up everything you're saying. So any idea, or not any, I want two ideas or facts that you might share.
Well, I would highlight the correct quoting of the Morabian study, which is that when things are incongruous, when they don't make sense, our gut goes to what the nonverbals are, that tone of voice. And the second one is that when you're a novice, the research shows you really do need more positive feedback. So if you're not getting it, I would suggest you ask for it. So ask your boss or a colleague, what went well? What did you like about the presentation? And only then can you go to what could I do differently next time.
Yeah. I love that suggestion. I think we need to take more ownership of asking for feedback and asking for positive feedback. I think sometimes people will kind of step back, or we will step back and think, oh, nobody really liked it, or wait to hear, did I get an email? Did people enjoy this, that, or the other thing? And there is nothing wrong. And in fact, it's really good to reach out to people who were wherever you gave your presentation, the audience, if you know some people, to seek it out and directly ask what was good, what would make it even better.
Right. Because when it's immediate, they're going to remember, they're going to have something for you. If you wait a week, they're going to be like, oh, right. They've had 5,000 meetings in the intervening time. Yeah.
Exactly. So I always like to, as coaches, we want things to be actionable. Obviously, we want people to be able to think, digest, and kind of marinate in what we talk about. At the same time, we want things to be actionable. So what would be three simple, and I keep saying simple-ish, actions, because nothing's ever that simple. What are three simple-ish actions that our viewers can take today?
I want to combine somatic and a cognitive practices for managing nerves. So a somatic practice, I would have a number one be your choose your own adventure. What's the thing that's going to ground you, whether it's music or exercise or petting your dog? That's been proven to lower your heart rate. Pick one of those for you to center yourself before a presentation, if you can. The second thing is the intention. What's your verb? What do you want to do to the other person, to the people listening to you? What do you want them to do or to feel? And then the third thing is a cognitive one, as well as intention, I think, is a little bit of both. And that is the ABCDE. So it can also be a presentation that went really well. What were your thoughts going into that presentation? I do this for things that maybe didn't go well, but I also had one where I was going down a really negative path and I shifted the thought and I wrote it down. And my thought was, sounds a little egotistical, but it worked for me. What if this was the best presentation I ever gave? And suddenly that shifted my whole outlook, opened me up. I wasn't like as contracted and pulled down and nervous. And I don't know that it was the best one I ever gave, but it went really well.
Oh, I love that. And the ABC, we'll put in the chat just some videos or some reference to that. I use the ABC plus D and E regularly with clients. And it is one of the things that resonates all the time. I literally will have a client, a month after we've met, come back and say, well, I did the ABC. And I'm like, yes, it's just so, it's fantastic. And actually I did with Senya, I did a video specifically on that being my favorite tool to use. So we'll put that in the link as well. What I want to call out though here is you started with somatic, then you went to intention, then ABCDE or ABC. What I really want to highlight there is you started with that somatic feeling. We often think about with our nerves, oh gosh, I need more note cards. I need to do more research. I need to memorize this. And we get so stuck in our head. And that was not your first step. That was down the line. It's like, let's get out of the head and into the body.
Yes. And I'm so glad you mentioned the notes. I think people who are really smart tend to go to, I need to prepare more. And first of all, don't ever write out a script unless you're giving a State of the Union address. You want to have bullet points because the script you can get lost in. If you miss a word, then you're thinking about it and nobody knows what your script is. So I really do agree that it's not going to help you to look at your presentation anymore past a certain point. That starting with something physical is going to ground you and get you out of that swirl.
Yeah. And again, I think that brings it back to authenticity. It allows you to be authentically you. It allows you to pick up the energy of the people in the room and maybe go deeper into when you see their lights going off in their heads, go deeper into that and really be present. So
yeah, I mean, it's really an improv dance. You have a structure, but you want to be able to respond to the people in the room. And I think the best speakers really do that.
Yeah, agreed. So a final thought, what is possible when somebody really learns how to work with their nerves, their performance anxiety / performance nerves?
I think what's possible is a newfound level of confidence and, as we say in America, gravitas. That feeling that when you walk in the room, you're owning the room or owning the Zoom, as it were. And that is also contagious. When you feel excited and confident about your topic, you just put the audience at ease because the audience wants you to succeed. They want you to they don't want to have to be worried for you. So I think that's what I've seen with my clients, which has been really exciting for them it's like they physically get bigger. It's kind of amazing to watch.
Oh, yeah. Oh, more confidence. And I love that. Own the Zoom, own your room, wherever you are. So thank you, Shannon. I soaked up all these tips. I'm excited to get this out in the world to help others feel more confident and just step into their power zone.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, Eileen.
Always. Thank you.